Hey everybody, and welcome to Hell is for Children. This show is on every Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, which is 2100 hours Central European Time. And my name is Geerte Frenken, and this show is all about the topic of protective mothers and their children. So what's a protective mother? A protective mother tries to protect her child or children from their abusive fathers by many means necessary, which is an uphill battle in today's global corrupt family court system that thrives on paternal entitlement. Today's guest is protective mother Lillian Song, who lost custody of her child to her abusive ex, despite documented evidence of child abuse and molestation, and despite prior orders of protection against him. I'm very honored to have her on the show as a guest on the show as a guest today. So welcome to Hell is for Children, Lillian.
Hi, thanks.
Well, let's start the interview with you sharing how you got to get to the situation that you're in right now. How did you become a protective mother?
I simply wanted a divorce from an abusive then husband. I had a very young child that I wanted to protect. I didn't know anything about domestic violence. I was never one before. I didn't know anybody that was a victim of domestic violence. So going through the process of the divorce, then I was waking up to the fact that I am a domestic violence victim, and that was difficult to realize and accept. And at times I have a hard time doing that now. So fast forward after the divorce, I was coerced into joint custody, which would have been fantastic if my soon-to-be ex-husband was normal meaning not abusive, not coercive, not controlling, except I didn't have that in my case. But I'm talking in a way that I realize everything after the fact. That at that time I didn't realize it was coercion. I didn't realize it was extortion. I didn't know that I was going to be set up in a way that I would eventually lose custody altogether. I have no history of criminal convictions or allegations. I had nothing in my history to suggest that I am an unfit parent to even a dog, and I had a dog at the time too that I was also trying to protect. So almost about a year later, I was in court during a trial, and during the trial, it was my ex-husband who was seeking full physical and legal custody. I had no idea that I would lose. I lost everything. I lost physical, legal custody, and then I was placed on pay by the hour supervised parenting time. And that's what I was reduced to. All at the same time, it was my young child, who was not being protected whatsoever. In fact, I was barred from trying to protect him, hence the supervised parenting time, hence no custody at all. And even going through that, I had no idea this was something that was going on everywhere, not just to me, not just in my neighborhood or my state. It was going on everywhere, all across this country and internationally, like your case. And that's who I am now.
So share with the viewers, because you had prior orders of protection against him. So how was your ex able to convince a judge that suddenly he was not a danger to you or your child? Because somehow was able to convince that judge then, right?
Yeah, well, there are several factors. First of all, when you're a domestic violence survivor or victim or whatever you want to call it, you don't get the protection that you think you're going to get, and you don't get the protection that you hear they get. I was able to obtain a protection order, and was only the second one that I actually served it upon him, because it's a scary notion. I had to go back. I was still living with him in my marital home. We were married. And to go to the police, to go to the court and ask for protection, um, it's not safe to do in many cases because it really doesn't do anything to protect you. It gives you a court order telling the perpetrator not to do certain things. It doesn't bar them from doing anything. And you realize the law enforcement really doesn't want to believe you. They stay away from you, or the society even said, well, why'd you stay? Why don't you leave? Why don't you get over it? You can't just get over someone who has a laser beam focus on you to destroy you, especially when you have something that they can hurt by proxy. Typically, your child. Younger, the more vulnerable they are. So when I got this protection order, I had to fight for it in court. He didn't just accept it. He fought for it. I had to go in front of him and testify for I think it was like a 3-hour hearing. And then he took it all the way to the appeals court. We also should mention that most domestic violence victims are financially deprived. That's one of the ways to control someone. By the time you're paying for everything, for your expense, your household, your child, everything you can think of that you need to pay. And then on top of that, you're paying thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fees. It's absolutely draining. So the protection order was upheld for after a long duration. But what I didn't know, the culprit of how this all switched was I hired a guardian ad litem. Now in Oakland County, Michigan is where I live. Guardian ad litems are only allowed to be appointed as a lawyer. I don't know if that's lawful, but that's how it's done. So this lawyer guardian ad litem that I appointed post-divorce, at the time of the divorce settlement, I thought, I didn't vet her. I didn't interview her. I didn't check her out. I was still always thinking, well, you just tell the truth. People are good, and there's no way this is going to happen to me. People are going to care for my child and follow the law. She didn't do any of that. She's the one who orchestrated the entire thing. Her name is Carrie Middleditch-Weigott. That name should sound familiar because she hurts many families. So she gets on board after the divorce, and she is engineering these things against me. And eventually, with her help, I lost custody. After I showed in court that my son is at best being neglected by my then ex-husband, it was proof. It's clear proof that he was at best being neglected. Also, when the trial began, I got a new judge. This new judge is not nice. So that was a year and a half ago. I've been on supervised parent time for a year and a half with my son.
So the guardian ad litem, she turned against you. So it seems like your ex might have been in cahoots with the guardian ad litem somehow to battle you over for the custody. But you had also other evidence besides neglect to show the judge. Is that correct?
I submitted about 80 photographs of various injuries to my child. And at the time when an emergency hearing was scheduled, because my ex-husband was upset that I presented those photos at the beginning of my trial testimony, the judge said, we're not going to enter any of these. So they've been, I officially, perhaps unofficially, expunged from the records. And I was told not to talk about them. never show them again. Don't replicate them. Get rid of them.
So I'm going to assume that you went to CPS with these photographs. What did they do?
They were prior to CPS investigations. One thing about abusers, they can be very charming. And they often, Lundy Bancroft talks about this, they often are much more put together, seemingly confident because they are controlling something. And the victims, on the other hand, look unstable, disheveled, because that's how the life is behind the closed doors. And so both times, the first time the investigator, there were two of those were anonymous complaints. I don't know where they came from. First one was fine and sympathetic toward my son until she met my ex-husband. And suddenly she was mean, curt, and short. And it was closed, of course. The second time was another anonymous phone call, complaint made by, I don't know. And this time, the guardian ad litem stepped in. She said, what injuries? And they have photos. These photos have been revealed to certain sources. They weren't out there on the internet world thinking, look at these, because they're injuries of my precious child. And in hopes of getting help for him. And CPS did have some of them at least. And Carrie Middle just decided to interject herself into the investigation. So these injuries have nothing to do with the father, and the mom's unstable. So the glaring factor is these injuries have nothing to do with the father, but they had something to do with someone. My son wasn't injuring himself on his back. And they just dropped it and threatened me of certain outcome in the event there would be another report that becomes unsubstantiated.
So you have substantiated evidence, but it's made to look on the record as unsubstantiated, both by CPS and by a family court judge.
Yes, well, the difference with the judge is that she said on the record, I'm not going to allow these photos to be entered. Oh, that's against rules of evidence.
Did you have an attorney at this time?
They were properly admitted, but she decided they weren't going to be admitted. So they were expunged after the fact.
Wow.
They also placed me on psychological evaluation, of course. That was the second one. I had to pay for it, of course. I have to pay to see my child, of course. And I had to go, I have to abide by whatever the psychologist who was to evaluate me recommended. Now, even that didn't go fairly. Carrie Middleditch insisted that I go to one psychologist and one psychologist only, even though I had an evaluation done by a psychiatrist. That wasn't good enough. So obviously when someone says you can only go to one person, there's a reason you have to go to one person. So lo and behold, this doctor prescribes family therapy with my abuser. And that's the latest now. So do they really want me to, bear in mind though, I've been supervised for a year and a half. My supervisor has absolutely nothing bad to say about me. In fact, my reports are glorious. I'm a good mother. We're very attached. We're especially bonded. And any and all signs of continuous bruisings or behaviors were not attributed to me whatsoever because they were handed to me, and he was handed to me that way, and I only see him 2 hours under strict supervision in public. But that doesn't matter because this isn't about my child. or protecting a child. It's about siphoning money and keeping someone under control by using our children.
So it's quite an outrageous situation. Here you have prior orders of protection against your abusive ex that a judge has approved and that were in place, and this is now reversed, even though you have evidence of child abuse, child molestation. All of that is swept under the rug, and now you're placed on supervised visitation. Tell me what that's like for you and your son.
I've been through so much that I can handle, accept and handle just about anything. It's like going through a war, and I'm still breathing. My son, on the other hand, he's not old enough to understand why this has happened, why it happened when he was just a small, barely a toddler, and it's still going on. Seeing him and pushing him away at the end of each visit is like killing him, because he just doesn't want to go home. Sometimes he leaves with his head down, just goes forward to his father's car. Sometimes he will fight, cry. Sometimes he'll break down and just sob. And sometimes he will try to trick me and say, which way is home? So he can actually walk. It's breaking. What I am forced to do with my son at the end of each visit is inhumane.
Yeah, I think it's what's important to point out to viewers who are not aware how this goes down is that these supervised visitations were originally created for people in jail. And they criminalize protective mothers by placing them in these situations with their children, because what are our children supposed to think of seeing mom under supervision all of a sudden? Like, that's psychologically so wrong. Mom is all of a sudden made to be someone who can't be alone with you or something, right? I mean, this is what it can't be any other way for these children going through that they must interpret it that way. And that by itself is, to me, is like a huge human rights violation, because it creates a picture in the mind of the child that there's something wrong with mom. It should never be allowed in any of these custody situations unless there is clear evidence that the mother is dangerous to the child. In this case, the actual reverse is going on. Your ex is the one who's dangerous, and you're now the one that supposedly your son needs protection from with supervised visitation. Is absolutely outrageous. What is that like for you to have these supervised visitations?
It's emotionally draining. It is financially draining. My biggest concern is what it does to my son, because I know that at the beginning of every visit, he's hoping that he could go home, and he cannot. Sometimes he fights it. Sometimes, like I said, he just gives up and goes. And my case is not the worst. I know some people who've been supervised for 5 years or more. Absolute torture. And what does this tell us? Because if supervision shouldn't be just supervision, if someone needs to be supervised to see their kid, it should be therapeutic or toward a meaningful reunification. There's none of that. It's simply paying out money and putting someone under control and absolutely harming the children in the interim. What happens to these children after? What happens when these children, 18, 19, 30 years old, and they have these memories of seeing their mom supervised and someone's critiquing everything they're saying, everything they're doing. And they don't understand why, because I do believe that children know who their protective parent is. Even in a good parent situation, like my family, my parents have been married forever. Um, Even though I love them both dearly, I know which one is the safer one, or the one to go to.
Mm-hmm.
And then you know that in a situation where there's one who's abusive, it's obvious. But these children are forced to be silenced, and they're silenced because their protective parent is being silenced, and they watch it, they see it. My son used to verbalize; he doesn't anymore. Whose benefit is that? And this particular guardian ad litem, and even the psychologists who worked against me, they're really working against my son. They have no interest in my son whatsoever. And my son doesn't deserve this. As many as I believe 58,000 children every year are trafficked away from the good parent. How is that humane? How could this happen in this country? We learn the exact opposite in grade school, that our justice system is excellent, superb. Our human rights acts are bar none. Our system is the best in the world. And here we are. We have mothers who are being jailed, supervised, or even totally banned, or some are murdered, or some commit suicide.
It's truly a war on mothers and children that is going on, and your case is almost typical, which sounds awful, but it's true, right? I mean, once I got into the situation and I started looking at all the other cases, yours included, they're all the same. We submit evidence of child abuse, and it's neglected, it's ignored, and the father gets custody by accusing the mother of parental alienation. It's like a script in all our cases that plays out the same way. And it leaves me wondering, what can we do? Do you still have an attorney at this point?
Yes, I do. I don't know what matters anymore. And I don't want to sound negative here, but I don't know any substantial case where the family court illegal custody arrangement has been reversed. I have
Mm-hmm.
heard some of the CPS cases. Not that those cases are less detrimental, but I've not heard of one reversing in family courts, or at least remanded. These type of things just seem to go on there since there's too much money to be made for these to be corrected. Um, while there may be people who are actually wanting to change these things or are not purposely causing harm, there are way too many people, and when I say people who have the power to change lives, like judges, a guardian ad litem, or doctors, or psychologists, or CPS, and therapists, and school teachers, childcare workers. They're making the wrong call. And why does that happen? Is it plain misogyny? Maybe. Is it simply because they don't want to hear about domestic violence, how it impacts the mother and the child? Maybe. When I started going to domestic violence therapy, that's something they've said over and over again. People don't want to hear about this. Oh, why is that? Because it's just too difficult to accept that there are people like this that would do this to someone else, or to their own children. And I'm constantly asking, okay, so who cares about the children? No one. we have best interest factors or best, whatever that term is.
The best interest of the child.
Right. It's in every court. But how is it that I meet mother after mother, and fathers too, mother after mother after mother, that has lost custody with evidence that they are the fit parent and the other one wasn't? They lose custody. I know a woman who's been in federal prison for 10 months, and she is the non-offending parent. And when I said non-offending, the other one is the offender. I know another mother just recently, I think you heard it too, two mothers, they were jailed because I think one sent a note for graduation, happy birthday, something like that. I mean, how does it end you in jail? Or another one was accused of, charged with kidnapping. How do you kidnap your child who's not fighting you? It doesn't make sense, but here we are. And I think this helps to perpetuate this because the society will say, well, what's wrong with you? How could you be a mom and lose custody? Because moms do have the higher level given to them as the maternal party. You're automatically supposed to be better. And if you lost custody, you're obviously not fit. There's something really wrong with you because our justice system is excellent. I used to think that too. I thought the justice system was great until I entered it in family court. Even after I lost custody, I didn't realize that was happening. I was in a daze. And about a year ago, almost a year ago, I started researching. Why is this happening? What is happening here? There's something more than this. There's something more than me because I'm not this monster who should be supervised against the child. I'm not the one who's making such horrible decisions that I should be ripped away from my child, who I need to protect, and I can't by court order. And I started finding so many people in the same situation. And the court knows that they have a captive audience. They don't target the good parent for no reason because the good parent will fight until they can't fight anymore. And while that may be the profiting part of the story, the one that's always left out is the reason why this is such a profiting business, the children.
Yeah, it's also good to point out that all these court professionals that are involved in these, what they call high conflict divorce dramas, can set their own outrageous hourly fees. Yeah. This is an industry that has no oversight and no control. Many attorneys charge anywhere up from usually about $400 an hour on up. Often these guardian ad litems are appointed to you without you even requesting it, and then you're ordered to pay for them. It's like being ordered to go to a doctor while you're not sick and then ordered to pay the bills. Yeah. There's no regulation around any of this, and these people have a great incentive to keep these conflicts going for as long as they can. Absolutely. And they never close the case. It's really interesting. When you look at all our cases, they don't close the case. So they're ongoing. And so if a child, let's say in your situation, if the child is very young, that means that the court and all these professionals around it can now have you as their meal ticket until the child is 18 years old. And the case that you just mentioned about the mother who was jailed because she passed a note on to her child who graduated high school, that child was no longer a child because he was 18, right? So they continue to create situations for us to go to court. which almost makes it, gives us an incentive to go pro se and bleed the fathers dry. But in the end, that's not what this is about. It's not about winning or losing. It's about the children. It's about that the fact that we can't even hold on to our kids, even though we haven't done anything to them. And it's just a sickening industry, and it's federally funded as well. And like you, when I lost custody of my daughter, I started researching that, and it turns out that the fathers get funding from the government to set up these conflict situations, and to get child support from the mothers as well. And but the mothers get no funding at all, which creates this unequal situation from the get-go.
And I want to talk about a little bit, and not a lot, about the fatherhood.gov. It helps no one. It doesn't help fathers. It doesn't help mothers. They do, utilize the fathers who are also going through the court battle, the family court battles, and of course there are fathers who are good, who can also be targeted this way. They're under the misconception that they're actually going to get help. They don't. They don't get help because, like you said, the system, the supervised parenting time was designed for offenders, incarcerated offenders. And so that is part of fatherhood.gov. That's what it was designed for. But it's not doing that. It's just funding the coffers of the family court system, where now there are not enough jailed fathers who need help, but there's enough funding to go around. So what are they going to do with that money? They need to create a non-custodial parent. And you can't be a non-custodial parent if you have joint custody. Somebody has to lose. And of course, it has nothing to do with the child. Someone has to be the bad parent. And, I often talk about domestic violence victim because I am one, and it's easy target. I know some courts know how they set up their dockets, who they're going to go after. It's sort of at a glance, and it takes a lot of comparing and looking at how the docket system is made, that they certainly know who they're going to go after. It's designed from the beginning, or they'll set it up so they can design it later, like my case. But non-custodial parent has to be established for the maximized funding. And that's where bottom line is. It takes special type of character to hurt children and put them by the wayside, despite possible great harm to them that's lasting, perhaps lifetime. It takes narcissistic, abusive character to do this, to perpetuate and help this go on. And it's not even that special. If we're just by thinking about how many parents I know that are fit, have no contact with their children, it doesn't seem very special anymore. It's what these type of characters are everywhere, because it takes how many so-called professionals to target a child and the child's parent. It's not one-on-one. It's several on a case. And that's quite disturbing to me. And most people who do not enter this type of cases don't know. And maybe they do know, because when I read the statistic that 1 in 3 women is is abused. I look down my street and count how many houses there are. That's every third house. And that's just appalling. that our statistic in this country against with abuse is that high, and we close our eyes to them. I did.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I was told something else. I, 15 years ago or 20 years ago, whenever, I would have thought, if I met a mom who says, I lost custody of my child, and without anything else given further, I probably would have thought, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where a lot of us are. We belong to this club that we were forced into, that we understand each other. We don't have to explain every detail of what happened. We don't hear, oh no, that's not legal. That can't happen.
Yeah.
Because we know it happens.
Well, that's why we do the show, to educate the larger people, the larger audience out there who's not aware that this is going on, that this is in fact going on, and also to warn the mothers who are not yet in this situation that this is the type of arena that they will enter once they go for their divorce, when they have children. That's not to say that you should stay with your abuser when you have children, because that's not an option either. Basically, when you have an abusive partner and you have children, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Doesn't matter if you have money or not. We know that there are celebrities going through this who spend, $3-4 million on their cases and they still don't win. And again, it's not about winning or losing, but it does give an insight into exactly what you're saying, the strategy of the family court system to keep these things endlessly going. I know there's some laws in the making right now that push for the 50-50 custody law. Many people seem to want that. What are your thoughts about the 50-50 mandated custody law that's being suggested all around the country in the United States at the moment?
It seems like a red herring to me. Like I said in the beginning, I would not have a problem with 50-50 if the soon-to-be ex-spouse is not abusive. Because you can't be abusive to one person and no one else. This abuser's character is a lifestyle. It's not something they just hone in on one person only. This is what they do. They just have a victim. So when I say it seems like a red herring, is that it seems as though this really is about an abuser getting 50-50, not a good father or a good mother. And I don't know who's funding that. I have an idea. By the way, when we're talking about funding, this doesn't grow. This money doesn't grow on a tree. This is the money that you, I, and everyone else pays every year when you file your tax returns. When the chunk of money is gone, parts of it is going to fatherhood.gov, among other things. Your local government has it too. Your state has your state has a matching program. Your local county has a matching program. Sometimes your city. This type of atrocity that's being done against our children is funded by you and me. All of us fund this. And there's no checks and balances on any of this. We don't know if this is benefiting anyone, except we can track who is employed for it.
And that's what we should do. We should follow the money. And for those viewers who are not aware that this is happening, I've created here on my website this tag here called Reflection. And when you scroll down, here's an audio recording that's 10 minutes that explains how the fathers steal the children through the court system from the protective mothers. But if you scroll down a little bit here and you click on this link over here, these are all clickable links with source data. You actually get to a website where this is all evidence of the federal funding of the fatherhood, the fatherhood.gov that you're mentioning. You can actually follow the money back to where it's coming from. And it's to the point where even convicted murderers are getting sole custody of children. It's pretty upsetting. But yeah, I keep on bringing links up during my shows because I want people to know that what we're talking about is all evidenced. Everything that we're saying, there's evidence for it. We're not just making this stuff up as we go along. We're not just, disgruntled parents. Because when I shared the announcement of your show on Facebook, there were some people who said, how can this be? How can this mom lose custody of her child if she has evidence of abuse and molestation? And it's so hard for me because I feel like, wow, I've been doing so many shows and I'm showing all this data, and it's like, people, come on, wake up. This is really happening. We have so much educating to do of the larger public that's just not aware. And I agree with you about the 50-50 law that's being proposed. I don't think it's a good idea at all. Because in situations when you have an abusive ex, an abusive partners, you don't want to be forced into a 50-50 custody arrangement, because it sets you up to having to deal with the abusive ex for the next, I don't know how many years, right?
Well, I was set up that way. It lasted 13 months.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it a setup? We should talk about that. When you are divorcing or separating an abusive partner, 50-50 is designed to fail. Why is that? Courts have this thing called, I want to say co-parenting. There's a certain term that they use.
Mm-hmm.
You have to co-parent regardless of the fact that one is completely unable to co-parent, because that characteristic is such that is abusive and controlling. So the one who appears to be unable to cooperate is actually the one who can't cooperate to the abusive person who is co-parenting your child. Was that used against me? Yeah, it was. I would receive, one of the things that was used against me was I didn't respond to his emails often enough. Often enough turned out to be one every 2.5 days. Wasn't enough.
Yeah, you weren't giving him enough attention.
And that was one of those descriptions that said you can't co-parent about your child, and it didn't matter that it was just controlling behavior that didn't have anything to do with co-parenting. So that's an example how it is set up to fail, because they will control you. They'll control everything you do. You can't do anything without their approval or their schedule, and synchronizing everything, even if it's completely unnecessary. Their desires and everything they want, even if it's just made up stuff that just to engage with you. And it's not a normal engaging. I mean, I could want to engage with someone that I think highly and respectful of. It's not that. It's if I want to engage with someone just to annoy them, to stalk them, to control them, that's not a healthy behavior. But I know, and you know, and we know the courts punish the one that tries to minimize that abusive contact, because after all, if you're really looking at the best interest of a child, that kind of energy and abusive control content in a co-parent situation can't be healthy to a child. Because when I am feeding my 3-year-old soul breakfast and I'm getting all these emails coming in, why aren't you answering? Why, I asked you this. It's distracting at least. Or when the guardian
It's,
item is trying to tell me what I can and cannot do with my child, and I'm getting screaming emails between 9:30 at night to 11 p.m. at night. That's distracting too. But yeah, you cannot co-parent with an abuser. There's not a prescription in the world that's going to change that. But who gets punished is the one who is wanting to minimize that abusive interaction that is solely created by the abuser and supported by the court, who turn a blind eye and say, you need to co-parent. Of course I do, but it's impossible. And the one who's complaining about the other person not co-parenting is typically the abuser, because they want that control. They want the attention. So who gets harmed by it? Ultimately, it's always the child. Um, the entire thing, we have great laws. We have laws that protect victims of domestic spousal abuse, child abuse. We have CPS, we have DCF, we have counselors, we have family therapists, we have friend of the court, AFCs. We have all those things. On paper, if those things were working right, there should not be a single child who is abused.
I absolutely agree with you. The entire system is upside down. If the courts really cared about the best interest of the child, the court should really care about how is the mother treated. If the mother is having to deal with what I call a domestic terrorist, then there's no co-parenting possible. There is no negotiation possible with a terrorist. And the energy, the engagement is absolutely toxic. And any healthy woman will choose not to engage, to keep that particular toxic person as far away from herself and her children as possible. And that should be applauded by the court, because it's in the best interest of the child not to be around toxic people and abuse. It is extremely damaging for the psychological development of the child and the emotional well-being for the child to be witness of this type of behavior of the father against the mother. And you're right, sometimes it's the other way around, where the mother is abusive, but from what I'm seeing, the majority of the cases, the father's inflicting the abuse. That's a discussion, of course, that's going on, where some people claim that that's not true. But this is what I see. I see thousands and thousands and thousands of mothers all across the world dealing with the same dynamics. And if this guardian ad litem cared about your son, she should be supporting you in staying away from your ex as much as possible, and having a protection order for your son against his father. But here we are. We're in like the complete opposite situation of what it should be. It's the question is, how do we get out of it? What can we do to reverse this upside down situation?
Well, that's a good question. I wish I had an answer to that. I wish somebody had an answer to that. I've been searching to see if anyone has a prescription, a solution, or something. And I've heard heartbreaking stories about the unsuccessful nature of somebody wanting to do something. I've also heard some parents say, I refuse to fight it. I know I'm going to end up paying 5 digits, six digits, 7 digits to try to get anywhere near fair custody for the sake of my child. And some of these people have completely stopped fighting. I can't fight it. I can't find my abuser. There's no way. I can't play this game and I won't. And they just completely walked away. Is that a bad thing? I don't know. Because people like me, people like some others, like you, what will be the alternative?
Well, I can't walk away from what's happening to my daughter. So I'm going to continue to fight it. And one of the reasons why I have the show is not just to be supportive to other protective mothers and to have for other protective mothers to share their story or to educate the larger public, but also as a think tank to come up with solutions. And one of the things that when I'm talking to you about your situation that comes to mind for me when dealing with these narcissists, narcissism can actually be detected in the brain by MRI scans. The area in the brain that is related to empathy, there's no electrical activity in the area of the brain of narcissists.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about in terms of creating change in this situation is to make to have certain parameters in place that will not allow these characters to use family court as a form of coercive control, as a tool to continue to inflict abuse via the court on their ex-spouses and their children. And one of those parameters could be that if a litigant is constantly filing motions against their ex about child custody, that person might very well get an MRI scan to see whether they are narcissists, and if so, that should be grounds to yank custody from them and to place that parent under supervised visitation because of the toxic energy that they are inflicting on the children. This is kind of where I'm going with it, and I'm not saying that I have all the answers. Maybe none of them are valid. Who knows? Right. But we have to start thinking of ways to formulate it in such a way or come up with solutions that we can actually bring to policymakers and explain a way out that we would like to see.
I think that word policy might be, it's something that I think is important, the policy. We don't have an audit system of these funded programs. The entire court is funded. Is there an audit there? I don't think so.
No.
There ought to be probably bi-yearly audit to every single court in this country.
Yeah, great points. Let's follow the money and hold the people accountable that are, pouring all this money into this. What's this fatherhood.gov all about? Why is that? Why does that even exist, right? If this is a pro-abuse industry, which is what I have concluded, then that's where we can yank it out by the roots, right? Pull out the funding. It's a great idea.
And if a program is born out of good intention and it is no longer a good program, it needs to cease. and it needs to go somewhere else. We can't just have a program just continuously fund and fund out of you and me and everyone else when it's completely ineffective to its intended purpose. Domestic violence is one of them. How many do you know that are completely underfunded, where they can't even get you a therapist? Or shelters that are closed. I called one before for me and my son. They didn't have space for me. I do know that in Oakland County in 1998, when family court was invented all over the country, except only one domestic violence group or women's violence groups, except for one, every single one of them closed at the same time. Did the family court take the responsibility in making sure that women are safe? No. Maybe that was the intention, but it didn't work because we still have people calling in with no space to go to, no place to hide out for however long, or they put you on a waiting list even to see a therapist. Something's not working. And it doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure that out. I don't know how many places I've been to that says we don't have the funding or the resources. I mean, we hear it on the news. So-and-so closed down. They didn't have the funding, or they went there. They didn't get the funding. That's unacceptable for something so important. Yet sometimes I will hear a program that just seems so meager compared to people's lives. And somebody has to be responsible. When we're voting, we should study more. We should take the responsibility of the given right to make sure you're doing your homework, except instead of asking your neighbor, "Oh, who are you voting for?" I'm going to do that too. Or that name sounds familiar. Because that one vote could change your life, your child's life, your neighbor's life. You and I aren't the only two who lost custody as fit parents. There are so many of us right now, maybe listening now, that are suffering, that have been suffering, and they're thinking of their children all the time.
Yeah, there's an estimated 2 million protective mothers in the United States alone, and the estimated global number is at least triple or quadruple that amount. And I agree with you. There's nothing more important than children. I mean, what else can have that level of value? And how come there's no attention to it in the media, for example, right? That's why I'm very happy to have CCN TV allow us to host this show to bring awareness to it. But I believe that the court system and CPS is not interested in change because they're lining their pockets with victims like us. So we have this incredible uphill battle against this corruption. I mean, it's run, my last guest last week, she called it a mafia. And I have to agree with her. I mean, this is a mafia, a ripoff. It's a Ponzi scheme to get our money and to get endless money from the government, from federal sources, but also from others. It's insane. It's an insane industry that we somehow have to stop. And I don't have all the answers to how to do that either, but I believe that it needs to become a priority. I think your idea of looking at who are you voting for is really wonderful. And we want to see more from politicians than just talk about it. We want to see action from the people in charge because they represent us. It's not like we're here to serve them. They are elected to serve us. And if they don't, place value and priority on safety of mothers and children, then what is this? A society that's only geared to what men want, what fathers want, what people with money want. Right? I mean, what are the priorities here? Human rights should be the number one priority of every government. And globally, we're seeing the exact opposite. And it's extremely disturbing. Is your son getting any type of help that you know for the situation that he's in?
The start of my custody trial began because I tried to take him to a child therapist. My ex-husband and the guardian ad litem, Carrie Middleditch, threatened the child psychologist where she wanted to be anonymous. Never ended up taking him because they threatened me so much that it had to be canceled. And a month later, he filed for full custody, for full legal and physical, because he just can't have me trying to get help for him. Because my son was showing a severe attachment where he would freak if he didn't see me at the corner of his eye. And he was having nightmare after nightmare. I mean, it was going on before our divorce, but it just kept going, and it was becoming very concerning where I just wanted someone to help him. And I wasn't able to do that. I went to court by myself, and the initial judge said, okay, well, nobody wants this. So guardian ad litem volunteered to assess my child. I mean, at the back of my mind thinking, you're not a child expert, are you? You're a guardian ad litem. But okay, this is what I'm going to end up with. She didn't do any of that. She didn't recommend anything. She didn't follow up with a court order, of her own court order, where she became part of it. She simply went on the record and said, the act of photographing the child's injuries was the abusive act itself. Therefore, mother's custody should suspend immediately. And the new judge said, okay. And that's what happened.
It's outrageous because you collected the evidence of the abuse. Now you are considered the abuser.
Yes.
Now, this guardian ad litem, she is rather famous, and I want to share my screen because as I was sharing your story on social media, there were also some fathers who responded saying, I have been victimized by this same guardian ad litem. And I want to show that because, like you said, it's not only the mothers that are going through there, and the majority of the cases is the mothers, but there are definitely also fathers that are targeted. Yeah. Here is her name, Middleditch.
Yep.
I think Miss Middleditch needs to be ditched. I'm very happy that this article appeared about your case. The name of the article is Michigan Court Protects Alleged Abuser and Strips Mom of Parental Rights, here in Communities Digital News. And it's the reason why these articles are important is because the names of these individuals are shown. So here's her name, Carrie Middleditch. Yeah. She is working in the same county as the Timoni case, yeah. Which is also a really big, notorious national case, and international, really. We know about it over here in Europe as well. So very important that she was outed. I'm all for outing the individuals that are inflicting these human rights violations. Just going to show that how much power one of these individuals have. Pretty sick, you know. Here's the divorce attorney of your ex, right? Emily Long. who is actually a criminal attorney, and she was an assistant prosecutor. What is she doing in family law in a custody case? One would wonder, right? She has made you into the criminal here that she's prosecuting, right?
Middleditch was too.
Okay.
So
All
was
right.
Jessica.
So they've all worked together?
They've all worked together at one point or another, yes.
And they probably are still having drinks in their spare time, concocting these stories.
Funny you should mention that.
I think you're frozen. You seem to have lost your audio. In any case, while you're trying to come back on with the audio, I wanted to also show the audience this website that's called AVVO, which is supposed to be a review page for attorneys, which doesn't allow you to actually submit honest reviews. And I would like to advise all the protective mothers to go on Yelp instead. You can place an honest review about your experience with attorneys in your case on Yelp. And if you know any mothers who are about to enter the awful family court arena, make sure that they actually go around and do a good search on reviews of these attorneys. I think I got you back on. We'll stop sharing. Yeah, there you are. Go ahead.
Whenever I hear someone who says, I'm going to file for a divorce when they have a child, my heart just stops thinking, I hope you don't end up like me. I hope nothing happens to you. And I think your child is not going to suffer like mine. And funny thing is, I was in court not that long ago. There was a woman sitting next to me, and she was going through photos. It appeared to be a child's photo, probably her child, with injuries to that child. And she was going through them, and I could tell she was very concentrating on what she was looking at and going over her notes. And I remember thinking in my head, this can't go well. And I ended up watching her hearing while I was waiting to go for mine. And yeah, it was about this abusive father who was trying to increase his custody, and the mother was disputing that he should, based on all of these injuries and the children having fear. It didn't go well. She was not even able to show them. And at that point, when I saw her sitting next to me, I just wanted to just tell her, don't. But then I thought, well, what is the alternative? Because if you don't, you can also get in trouble. You can still lose custody. Because there's, I don't know if I was this, but family court is this doctrine where you have to advocate for your child in the event you feel that your child is being abused by anyone. So if you fail to report it, if you fail to voice it, as the protective parent, you can lose custody because now you're unfit. Immediately you're unfit. And let's not even talk about the fact that you should have protected your child against that other parent who's the abuser. That just goes in the dark. But then when you do what I did and what she was about to do, you could still lose custody. Most likely you will. So I was at this place where I don't know what the right thing to say is.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And this is what I found out as well. And when my daughter disclosed abuse to her kindergarten teachers and they went to CPS to file a report, I was blamed for it. It's like, How can I even be blamed for the actions of other people? This is ridiculous. It was used against me in court as I was supposedly coaching these people. I mean, as if I have control over what other people are doing. It's outrageous. It happens in the classroom when I'm not even there. And really my concern is about the long-term impact on our children being exposed to this endless toxicity. I mean, now they're in full custody of the abuser. And I wanted to share my screen because there are situations that don't end well. Here, for example, how do I get rid of this promotion thing? Here, gone. This 14-year-old girl said enough is enough, and she actually, ended up killing her father because she continued watching him abuse her mom, and she was tired of it. And so now she's behind bars. I mean, what are these children supposed to do, right? What choices are left for them? I pray to God that not more children have to resort to this, because this is very extreme and it's awful. Also, it surprises me that it doesn't happen before. It also surprises me that these court professionals that we're talking about, that's not, more violence is not happening regarding them. I don't believe in violence, and I hope none of that happens. I would like to have a peaceful resolution of these human rights violations that are occurring right now through the system. We got to figure out a way for things not to escalate to this point. It's just very disturbing.
I think it's important to point out that vast majority, I don't know the exact data, I think it was 80 some percent, but the vast majority of these custody cases where the fit parent loses custody and maybe perhaps placed on some therapy or supervision where you pay, involves domestic violence, where that person who's targeted is the one who was abused. And we have this system that just it works in a complete different way than we think. It's different from saying this system doesn't work. It's different because it works in the exact opposite direction of what we think should happen. So if you're a child abused, you should be protected. It's no longer ignored. If it wasn't working, the child abuse was ignored. No, because if it was ignored, I would not have lost custody, and thousands and millions of other fit parents would not have lost custody to protect that abused child. It happens in a way that it's completely opposite, because if the child was abused, the system says, let's remove the protective parent. And that's where it's even more egregious.
Yeah.
Ignoring it, it's punishing and actually prescribing the opposite of what the doctrines are, what the programs are, what the system is, what our bills say, what our laws say, what our rules say, what our amendments say.
Yep. And you were mentioning that it's about 80% of mothers in this situation that lose custody to abusive fathers. And I'll share my screen here because often when that's mentioned, people say, oh, well, that can't be. But if you actually see what academic researchers have found on this, and you can see this online, this is one of the websites that will showcase that. It's that 82% of abusive fathers who fight for full custody will get it. So there's definitely gender bias going on in the courtroom. I don't engage in discussions on social media about this topic because it has been proven. And the researchers concluded that about 58,000 children per year in the United States alone are placed with abusive fathers. That they admitted that that's a very conservative estimate. You can read here journal article after journal article about gender bias. Here is another article about mothers on trial, gender bias in the courtroom. Just for those who are questioning our numbers, this has all been evidenced by research, and from what I'm understanding from the mothers who are in the situation, like you and me, who are starting to do research and really dig into the amounts of moms that this is happening to, that have researched it themselves, they say that the number is grossly underestimated, that number maybe is more per state than per country when it goes to the United States. That means that the actual number of 2 million is even a low estimate. I was actually at a party the other day, and I thought, oh my God, I'll just be quiet about my situation because, my situation is so extreme, so I just won't mention it, and, I need to have some social time, so we won't talk about it. And at the end of the party, we were left with about 7 or 8 people or so. And lo and behold, they were all in the situation that you and I are in. And I was shocked. I was shocked. I was like, this is impossible. I'm going to a party to get away from this. And I'm consciously not mentioning my situation. And here are 7 other mothers talking to me about dealing with narcissists and how they are damaging the kids and custody battles. And I'm like, it's beyond an epidemic. It's a true pandemic.
Now, I'm thinking there's a reason for that. It's a society that think, like I used to think, you're a mom, you don't have custody, really? You did something. And I think that's what it is. It's shameful. It makes you constantly question yourself. Am I really bad a mom? Did I really make mistakes? Because how could this happen to me? How could I not be able to parent my son? I didn't do anything wrong. And people look at you that way. And that's the hard part, I think, is that people either really don't understand or they don't care to understand. Because it's no secret there's misogyny from both genders. And just about everybody in my court are women.
Yeah, that's the other thing. A lot of the court professionals who inflict this on mothers are women themselves. So, when we talk about patriarchy, it's not even so much a gender issue. It's more about control. It's society trying to control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What that word stands for is suppression of another group by another group. And I wish that people could understand that more instead of, when we say patriarchy, when you and I say it, it's not a man, it's the ideology of someone controlling you for their own greed, power, or whatever is that they're gaining. And it's the absolute suppression and domination of another, whether it be a single person or a group. And this has happened throughout our history. Now it happens much more covertly, subversively, at the level where everyone is contributing to it and nobody knows. That meaning the federal funding. Federal funding, where does it come from? You, me, and everyone else. This money does not grow on tree. Money is not borrowed. It's taken from you to do this. And there are children that are suffering. There are children who are dead. The one in Connecticut where the judge refused protection of the mom and her child. thrown off a bridge by the abusive father because the mother was not believed.
Yeah.
And that's not an isolated story. We're talking about 1 in 3 and I think 1 in 5 children murdered by a family member. There's this thing I've been seeing, stranger danger. It's no longer really, it's not stranger. It's a family member.
Yeah, I'll share my screen here and bring you up to my fatalities database. And again, this is just a tip of the iceberg. You can see here the suicides of the protective mothers and the suicides of the children held hostage by abusive fathers. But the amount of moms and children who are murdered by the fathers is astounding. And these are all clickable links. They'll take you to the data related to all of these individuals who are murdered, passed away as a result of abusive fathers. These are all children who are murdered by their father by alphabet. And it's an endless scrollathon here. When I put this together, I tell you, it was, I did a lot of crying. I did a lot of crying. It's once you really start looking at it, because, you know, these things, when they fly by on Facebook, it's like, oh my God, you know, there's another casualty, and I want to, you know, see something that's not so difficult to look at. So you try to, you know, your brain is kind of programmed not to look at these difficult stories, but we must look at it because it's happening at such a rate that it's, I mean, this is a war on mothers and children, and we cannot look away. We must not ever look away. It truly is a Holocaust. We cannot accept this as a society, to have these children and mothers lose their lives over this. And one of the things that I was thinking about when we were talking about the MRI brain scans, really all the judges, the guardian ad litem's, the attorneys, the mediators, the evaluators should all get tested. They should all get an MRI brain scan, because we're not just dealing with an ex-spouse who is suffering from some kind of horrific disorder by, you know, taking hostage their own child or children. We're also dealing with an entire system that is facilitating those types of abductions, court abductions. And this is the possible result of that. All these children were murdered by their own fathers. And this is just what I've gathered. When I put this database together, I worked on this for about, I don't know, 3 or 4 weeks. So if I was going to do this full time, that list would be endlessly longer than that. And we must stop this, and we can stop it. Again, I do believe that we could change the world. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this show, and I wouldn't be doing the activism that I'm doing. So maybe one of the things we can suggest is that all lawmakers and all policymakers and everyone in the judicial system gets their brain scanned with an MRI before they even enter their profession, because obviously they're making decisions that are opposite of what should be happening. I'm just throwing something out there because I'm trying to find actual methods to prevent this from going on, so we don't need women's shelters. So our safety as mothers and children is that priority, is that number one priority in the whole of society. You know?
I don't know of a single job that is more important than deciding the life of a child and forward. Who has that job? A family court judge, right? Ultimately, along with other who place their input. So simply being elected or appointed because they have a law degree, or they have some connections, or they've spent more money on elections or they're friends with the governor is insufficient. When it comes to your child, my child, everyone's child, that should be the most coveted and most scrutinized job on earth. And we don't put too much effort into it. Even when we're voting, we don't put too much effort into it. Sometimes you don't get a say-so, but we should say so when you know there's something grossly wrong going on. And if you're not the type of person who's can't be involved in the matters of humanity, at least get involved because of your money. When you're paying your taxes, you should care and you should demand an audit to every person or every entity and every funding that you are forced to pay, whether you like it or not. For instance,
Absolutely.
Oakland County is alone, this county where I live in Michigan, several billion dollars just for the family court business. And we also have local matching funding system, local city, local county, state. And that's a lot of money.
We need an audit of that. I agree with you. And we need to have an audit of the individuals that are in control of this money flow. Because at the moment, how are we holding these folks accountable? We can file a bunch of complaints, right? We could file a complaint with the Bar Association. It usually ends up with some judicial oversight committee. And I'll share my screen here. They're currently, I just placed this on my Facebook timeline, where I said, we need a massive audit of the California Commission on Judicial Performance. That particular judicial performance is supposed to discipline corrupt judges, but they aren't. So here we are writing all these complaints about these judges, and it ends up with the California Commission on Judicial Performance, and then we find out that the 200,000 complaints that the state of California by itself receives every year in cases just like ours are barely touched on. They're dismissed. There no action is being taken. So here we are now at the point that we have to go and audit the auditor.
Right.
I mean, this is how, and I want to really, bring this message to the larger public that has no idea of what's going on, because this is how corrupt it is, that the folks who are supposed to supervise these court professionals now also need to be audited. And then we're probably going to end up at a federal level, I would think. Let's hope that at that level we don't need to also have to audit, because then who is left in charge here if all the ranks are participating in this Kids for Cash scheme? We need laws that get rid of the immunity of these judges and that actually place real consequences to what these attorneys are doing. If a complaint is filed against an attorney or a guardian ad litem or a mediator, like in my case, the mediator didn't do any mediation. She spoke to me on the phone for 10 minutes, and my ex-husband was on the other line with her for 10 minutes, and that was it. That's a mediation about the fate of my daughter's life, and it's in the hands of strangers. I don't know these people. I've never met them, but they are now making decisions about my life and about the life of my daughter. They have no place in my life. Just like that woman, Middle Ditch, guardian ad litem in your case, she has no place in your life and life of your son. And if we're going to have really contentious custody cases, we should start with screening the individuals inflicting the abuse, the alleged abuse. We should start screening there with scientific methods that are already available. Pedophilia can be tested, right? Your ex-husband should have been tested for pedophilia, right? And this is where I believe it needs to go. Not that I'm saying that all scientific screening methods are 100% reliable. I'm sure there's also some errors in that, but right now none of it is happening, right? It's just family courts where no evidence is even looked at, right? Evidence is, in your case, suppressed on purpose.
Yes. This is not, it was no longer an opinion. When you enter family court, there is a difference of rules of evidence, evidence rule, or there's preponderance of evidence, which is different from criminal court, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. So in family court, a judge only needs to believe you 51% to make a ruling. Well, what I submitted was beyond 51%. And because, and there's also a sort of a something opposite going on in family court where they said the judge has the wide discretion of opinion. At the same time, there's also fairly low rules of evidence, that the preponderance of evidence. So it's conflicting. You have a wide scope, yet you have a small window of which you need to believe you're one of the litigant over the other. So it cancels each other out. On top of the quasi immunity the judges are given, as well as a legal guardian ad litem. I believe there's a difference between a guardian ad litem and a legal guardian ad litem. And I may be wrong, but legal guardian ad litem in my case was also given quasi immunity, judicial immunity by the court's power. However, even though she had that type of immunity, she was a witness at my hearing and perjured herself. So a witness does not have immunity. On top of that, she did drop the case as my article points. For all those of you out there who have guardian ad litem or lawyer guardian ad litem, each state has a handbook that they are governed by, what they should do, how they are supposed to proceed and operate. And it is explicitly written for them to follow. My son's guardian ad litem, Carrie Middleditch-Weigott, did none of that. And it was pointed out to her in an email sent by me, not to the Judicial Tenure Committee or not to the judge. It wasn't a formal complaint. It was a complaint to her. And I basically said, you're mistaken if you think you're going to get paid any longer, because you've only been extorting me, and these are the things that you failed to do. She took herself off the case at her will. Of course, she slung poo everywhere in her motion as to why she was removing herself. So sometimes you get a person who will only be motivated by money. In her case, largely her motivation is money. And I wasn't going to allow her to keep extorting me, at least without letting her know, I know you're in violation. And I think especially if you're a domestic violence victim and you're constantly suppressed and judged and criticized of what you should do, sometimes you cry too much, sometimes you didn't cry at all, sometimes you look stoic, sometimes you look too emotional, which every one of those would be used against you. We tend to not to talk anymore or complain anymore, or even when it's completely legitimate and egregious, we remain silent for those biased reasons I just stated. But you can speak out. You don't have to always do it in a court setting. You can do it one-on-one, which what I did. And whatever her motivation was to withdraw, didn't matter. My son needed to be protected from her. She's done a lot of damage ever since, and she's placed another damaging professional in the way to prevent me from parenting my son who needs me. And her damage is lasting. But we're not completely without power. There are doctrines and there are rule books that you can cite, which they don't want you to do. But we have to learn it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us sort of become knowledgeable beyond what we ever intended or want to about the law and the Constitution and the rights of our children and ourselves, more than what we thought we ever needed. And it's unfortunate that we have to do it, but we have to do it. And like you say, you're never going to stop fighting. For those parents who decide not to fight, they simply mean they're not fighting anymore in court setting where they're playing the game of the courts, do this and do that, pay this and pay this and pay, 10,000 retainer here, 20,000 here, where they realize that there really isn't going to go anywhere except just bleed out hemorrhage money and resources and emotional toll, only to have nothing gained for it. I don't think they're giving up per se. I think they're just giving up in one way and try to fight another, because any way you look at it, any way you fight, any way, even if you don't fight, this is human torture. You're breathing, but you're tormented every day. And do I think many of these court staff or other ancillary professionals know that you are suffering, that your children are suffering? Absolutely, I do know that they know that you are suffering and your children are suffering.
That's why I think they're narcissists too, because if you're that sadistic, if you're participating in this and you're facilitating and you're part of that,
yes,
then you have a disorder too. And I'm serious. I think these people need to be screened, because that's not this is not what we're supposed to do on planet Earth here together. All of us in the human family is torture each other, right?
Right.
I mean, what kind of agenda is that? It places money as a value more than a child's safety. What's that about? So holding them accountable, screening these people, testing them for what they're doing, how they're behaving, their actions, should be number one. I also believe that one judge who doesn't know you and your son and your ex should have any decision-making powers to this level over your life. Why can it not be? Jury trials could be one way to go. I know that some people say, no, we don't want jury trials either. Well, then tell me what you would like. I need solutions. I want to really put together a list of solutions that we can all get behind. We can argue forever on what would be what could or couldn't work, but let's come up with a list of ideas that could work, that we can present to the people that still have a heart, who are in charge of making policy and creating laws, because I do not believe we can go on this way. And like you mentioned, there's more and more parents coming into our club, and most of them are moms. I think from what I'm seeing, it's about 90% is mothers. We must unite and bring about this change, because otherwise, what's the point? How can we go on every day? It's hard to, process this torture every day. And I do respect those moms who choose not to fight in court. I have a very wise, protective mama friend, and she says to me, Geerte, if all you do today is breathe, then that is the victory right there. And she's right, eventually our children are going to be adults, and they're going to make up their own minds. hopefully they will not be brainwashed to the point that they have rejected us. And we can, go from there. My motto is, this too shall pass, in one way or the other. It is connected to the element of time, and it will not go on forever. And hopefully, God will intervene without having us go through this for many more years. I wish that for everyone. Seriously, we need major divine intervention in all of our cases.
Well, here's what I like to propose. I would like to see is, yes, okay, first of all, you have to have the people who are helping to perpetuate this and harm children and harm good parents, are sadistic. They have flawed characters. They're mean. They're whatever you call it. Let's just say mean. They're out there. They're not going to have a heart. It's having a heart isn't going to fix this. To me, it's not going to fix, because there are too many who do not have it, and you can't give one who doesn't have it. A lot of them are in this type of powerful positions to control others. Let's put all the emotions aside, all the right things aside, and all the humanity aside. Let's just look at the business aspect of all of this, because this is a business. When it's money involved, it's business. Lots of money involved. You need to look at the money. When I started following this a year ago, I was told over and over again, follow the money. I'm like, I don't understand. What money? This is just human violation. It's violence. It's illegal. And I didn't get it until a month later. Like, oh, I get it now. It's about the money. And without it, we couldn't have all those mean people going after you and hurting your children, because they will no longer be empowered. We need to look at where the money is going and how it is or isn't working. There's no corporation, a successful corporation in America, that's going to keep funding money that isn't working. If I'm going to build a farm and it's a tree farm and the trees aren't growing, there's something wrong. I need to look at what is wrong here and not continuously ask for more money and get it. So these grants, in the way of grants, are being doled out at the federal level, that's collected by you, every single taxpayer who's paying to the federal taxes. Is being doled out to the entities or counties or nonprofit organizations. Say, I need this money to help to do this, and they're all good in writing. But when we're talking about a big funding entity like $12 million toward a child reunification or children's therapy, or shelters for women who are abused, who is making sure that is being spent correctly? We need to give out this federal funding and have some accountability after they give it out, not continuously give it and give it and give it, because the fact is, you and I know this is actually causing more harm than good. So when I talk about more programs, more bills that's requiring more funding and training and etc., I am skeptical, because there are programs out there, there are fundings out there, they're simply not working.
Absolutely. And what I'll do here is I'll share my screen and show you what this corporation that you're talking about, because family court and CPS and the way this money is extorted works like a corporation. We are involved in what you could call a federal Ponzi scheme. Is done by the conglomeration of the following organizations: the AFCC, the HHS, CRC, CPR, OCSE, the TANF, PSI, and CPPS. Unfortunately, this link leads to a PDF that was removed. I hope I did not contribute to that, but I'll find another source link for that. But these are the organizations through which this money is funneled, and the link that this was leading to was a mind map that showed all the channels of this funding that you're talking about. So that's definitely, we need the audit into this money thing, because once the money incentive is gone, then we can restore the human rights violations and hopefully reduce them to the 0 point again. Another way to do that is by making sure that these individual court professionals who are involved in cases like yours and mine cannot set these outrageous fees. We need to regulate their income. That would be a way to achieve change as well. I've mentioned on previous shows the possibility of creating a custody insurance from which each party has to pay for their particular participating attorneys and guardian ad litem, because that would completely make it a dull game for them, right?
Yeah, before family court, we had divorce court. And divorce court was exactly what it was. You got a divorce and you were done. Family court wasn't around until 1998 in the United States.
I didn't know that.
And divorce court went away. Now we have family court as division of the civil court. And family court goes on forever. As long as you have a family, it goes on forever.
Oh.
And these cases don't close. Technically, they do close. If you look at the cases, they are all closed when the divorce decree is signed and your divorce license that you got from the state is nullified.
Mm-hmm.
Your contract is severed. Your marriage license is severed. But with that severing of your license, you are forever held on with that county, with that court, as long as you have a minor child, which, by the way, that age keeps going up. It's no longer 18. Now it's 19 and a half. If you're involved in CPS, it's 21. And how long is it going to go? 19 was an adult. In family court, you're or 18. Family court, you could be 19 and a half. It just keeps going higher and higher.
Yeah, you mentioned that the federal government actually wants to completely raise your child, and possibly go even beyond that. There is a clip that you had that you wanted to share. If you still remember how to share the screen by going on the bottom here and clicking share screen.
And I'm on the wrong pattern.
Well, what I'll do is I'll share my screen and I'll bring up this article. They're now considering abandoning the equal rights claim to raise your kids, but this has been the agenda here. That the federal government claims they have equal rights to raising your children. Thank God it stirred an outrage, but this is the agenda, and here you see again that Department of Health and Human Services, HHS, that's involved in that. They want to tell you what to feed your kids, what to teach them in school, what vaccinations to give them. They want to have complete control over the next generations and generations to come, in every possible manner that they can achieve. This is what we need to get rid of. We need the government out of our private lives.
We have that in the history. We had that's part of the Nazi practice. That was part of the Japanese takeover of Korean practice. They did that.
I was just watching on CNN it was BBC, a whole documentary about North Korea and the brainwashing that's going on over there on every level. It was astounding. And there were some journalists who were secretively interviewed who were sharing that 99% of the population is completely brainwashed. They were applauding the nuclear testing that they were doing. They were made to believe that was necessary to defend their country. And they were showing this theater play of these children doing a performance. Yeah, I just lost connection. When I was in the middle of sharing how, brainwashing is happening worldwide, and of course I got yanked off the air at that crucial point. So yeah, the agenda that we're fighting is bigger than only family court, is really what the point is. And this is why I'm happy that we have alternative media and social media, so we could start voicing what we think of this instead of having us told what we are supposed to think. That's my main message with every show that I do is, please everyone, think for yourself and do the research, just like you did the research into finding out why it's happening, what's happening to you, why it's happening. It's extremely important.
I mean, absolute knowledge is always better than not having it. I was enlightened for learning that, but there's also this, they say ignorance is bliss too. Sometimes I wish I didn't know about what my country is doing against our children, in complete opposite of what I've been learned, what I've been indoctrinated, just like everyone else, my family, my friends, and my neighbors. We were all indoctrinated to think that we were living in one era, one idea that's humane and balanced and civilized, only to learn that it is complete opposite of what we were taught. And it's astounding to me that that's what it really is. I don't feel powerless about it, but it is nonetheless astounding. And only thing I keep going back to is, how about our children?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I respect about you is once I saw you enter the protective mother scene in social media and all the groups that we were in, I noticed that despite your own situation, you really started helping the other mothers as well. And this is what we need. We need all of us to be supportive to each other and brainstorm about solutions, but also just be there for each other so we can make it through another day. And other ways to fight besides thinking of ways to change policy, as we discussed, maybe possibly through auditing, which I think is an excellent idea and definitely is a necessity. Auditing all of these, the parts of this corporation, so to speak. We also need to bundle our cases and go to the United Nations, go to the American Organization of States and address this on an international level. And I'll share my screen here and take you to the Women's Coalition that's doing exactly that. The Women's Coalition is fighting for the right to raise and protect our children. It is an international initiative. And this week marks the submission of 1,000 cases that are just like ours, that are all documented cases of women losing custody to abusive fathers. You can still join this UN petition, and please visit the Women's Coalition website. And join the dialogue on Facebook, but also join that UN petition, because we continue to gather cases. And last year we had 150 cases. This year it's 1,000. We want to grow this to be so big that we can no longer be ignored. Only if we bundle our cases can we create the mass that's needed to overthrow this financial, paternally fascist system that's inflicting these human rights violations on us and our kids. So I am very happy to see that these types of initiatives are happening. Please join us. These are wonderful ideas. And then, of course, there are the cynics that say, yes, but this entire agenda of stealing kids is coming from the United Nations. And to them, I say, well, that might be the case. Well, let's present back to them what they cooked up in the kitchen then, and hold them responsible, right? Back to the idea of auditing the auditor and those in charge all the way up to the level of the United Nations, And I think your case is also included, yes?
I think so.
Yes, my case is included too. What was that?
It was last year too, I believe.
Yeah, it's last year, and you don't have to re-enter once you're part of it. It just keeps growing and getting bigger, and we can also bundle our cases for class action suits, RICO purposes, and this is should be the future for us to start bundling our cases and holding those people in charge accountable for what they're doing and where the money stream is going, like you mentioned so well. And hopefully one day we will achieve that change. We are out of time for today. I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. It is courageous. Every guest that shares a personal story like this, I have nothing but respect for that. It helps bring awareness to all of our stories. So you are the voice for so many other moms and children. So thank you for that. And we will continue to fight.
Thanks, Geerte.
Thank you. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is another episode of Hell is for Children, and I hope you join us all again next week. Bye, everybody.